Hey, it's Zach, and I'm back with another episode of Elevate and Accelerate. And today I want to talk to you a little bit more about why I am so passionate about helping people know, understand, embrace, and share their stories, not just entrepreneurs, but really anybody. But there is a reason why I focus with entrepreneurs as well. So this past Independence Day, we just got done celebrating July 4th, went to fireworks with the family. It was really a great time. But it had me thinking about independence in general and what independence was all about, not just from, another nation or a tyrannical power or something like that, but what does independence look like for us as entrepreneurs, getting outside of the grind of our businesses and working those 80 to 100-hour work weeks? But really, even more so, what is the independence that we get when we understand and embrace our own stories? Now, Stephen Covey talks about interdependence, which is kind of the next level. And so, we can kind of dissect the semantics here, but the idea of independence here was what I was thinking was not being bound and held captive to stories. And a lot of times it's our own victim mindset that does that. But in our ability to not only be able to understand those stories, but to understand what kinds of stories and what sort of stories we could be looking out for may help us to be able to understand our past, understand how we're impacted by others, and really understand this internal dialogue that may be keeping us from reaching our fullest potential. And I know that it happened to me and continues to happen in many different ways. And so I thought, what a great way to be able to share with you how some of these different stories impact us with if I just were to share with you my own story. So that's what I'm going to do. So bear with me through this process, but hopefully what I hope you will find is that by embracing your story, that it's really the first step towards liberating yourself from the chains of your own mind, from being beholden to people pleasing and some of these other things, being a victim and seeing yourself as a victim. And ultimately that when you share it, you are reclaiming your power, can ultimately find your own sense of freedom. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So for me, why am I so passionate about story? Well, the reality is that I spent the majority of my life being ashamed of my story. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's so many different parts of my life that were just full of shame. I grew up in a Christian family, and so there was a lot of moral standards that I had sort of grown up and grown around, but I have these earliest memories, and I think we all do, of times of trauma, maybe even abuse, or some of these different things that just sort of get glued into our minds, into our psyche, even into our bodies. A great book about that is The Body Keeps the Score. I forget who wrote it, but really there's these different experiences and circumstances and situations and cultural and societal norms and all these different things that are put on us from a very young age. And so, as we navigate these different types of stories that impact us, understanding those things will help us also be able to understand our stories and how they have affected who we are, who we've become, and who we can be moving into the future. And so for me, I remember one of my very first memories. Actually, I think this is my first memory, was getting ripped out of bed in the middle of the night by my dad. Our house was burning down. I didn't really know it at the time, but good reason to get ripped out of bed. So not mad at him about that at all. Actually, he said that an angel had woke him up, and it was the only reason why we were able to get out safely. So my mom grabbed my sister, my dad grabbed me, kind of threw me over his shoulder, down the steps, out the door, tucked us both into the back of a car. Now, being 3 years old, here's a picture of me. I think I was around 3 here, maybe less, maybe more, not really sure. But being 3 years old, I didn't really know how to process what was going on, right? But I do remember someone saying, don't turn around. Don't turn around and look, was the advice, or what I was given in that moment. And so my sister and I are sitting in the back seat of I think a neighbor's car, as my sister and I a few years later. And so we're sitting in the back seat. And of course, like any 3-year-old, and probably firstborn 3-year-old, the only thing that I was thinking was, I need to turn around and look outside. And so that's what I did. I got up, turned around, looked out the back window of the car, and saw that things were burning down. People were running around, and so again, my little 3-year-old mind couldn't really process a lot was going on. But that was one of my first memories. And so, from there we stayed with my grandparents. I think we stayed with a family friend, the Fricks, in Easton. I remember learning how to ride a bike there, getting pushed down a hill with no training wheels, kind of falling into the grass, and then starting over and doing it again. So I learned how to keep my balance that way, and was able to ride a bike after that. So that's pretty cool. We ended up moving to a house in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which is where my family, my parents grew up anyway. It was a small half a double. This is actually the house. So I went on Google Maps and pulled it up. We lived on the right-hand side of this. I'm pretty sure it's been that yellow for 30 years. I don't remember it being a different color. My room was actually the room with that air conditioner unit in there. If you can see that, I'm pretty sure that was the window. And that tree that's on the right-hand side there, I actually climbed many, many times. It's looked like that. It hasn't gotten any bigger. It looked exactly like that since I was a kid. So, hey, look, I've got a lot of really great memories riding my big wheel around there, playing with my sister. My best friend at that time lived right next door in the house, right next door. And so we would play in that little strip of grass on the side and, get into all sorts of mischief and all sorts of different things, right? And my parents, they did the best that they could. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad went to work. They didn't make a ton of money, and we were on government assistance, and did the best to make ends meet. But times were hard and difficult, I'm sure, for them. Being a parent and a dad now, kind of understand, the stress that can bring. And while they did their best to raise us and give us a good life, I believe their relationship wasn't destined to last. And so they ended up getting divorced when I was 8 years old. And another time that I was ripped out of bed in the middle of the night, only this time was by my mom. And so she rips me out of bed. My sister and I, puts us in the car. Common theme, I guess, puts us over to a friend's house, her friend's house. And so I'm laying on the couch, crying and watching Willy Wonka. And I remember making a deal with myself that I wasn't going to let that or really anything else affect me. Anything else outside of the world was not gonna faze me. I wasn't gonna shed a tear over it. And so it was probably 20 years or more from that moment until I actually cried about something. I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that I had cried. And so by that point, now it's a whole lot more. But anyway, the reason why I share that with you is because, whether it was those situations or other situations, whether it was, living with my stepdad and sort of the chaos of that family situation, of being thrust into that, and, whether it was, traumas or abuse or, whatever it might have been, my life could have been clearly defined by being ashamed of my story. Probably a better way to put that would be that I cared so much about being accepted, and being accepted by other people, that was my main driving force in social settings. I wanted people to accept me. And the way that I went about doing that a lot of times was being crazy or doing crazy things, because it would give me attention, good, bad, otherwise it didn't really matter. That's really what I was craving, and I chased it like a drug. Did many drugs, did a lot of drugs because I thought that was cool too, or because I would do too many at one time, because people would say, like, that would kill you, and I'd be like, look, I can do it anyway. Just think I'm cool. That's all I want. So look, one way or another, it was a terrible way to live, and it was not conducive to having deep or really meaningful relationships. And I'm still pretty close friends with a few of the guys that I grew up with through high school. We talk rather regularly, and so did make some good and strong friendships and relationships through those years. But at the core, I really had no idea who I was. And it was these stories of the past, right? We talked about these 3 different stories, and they all impact us. I'm actually working on the story mindset archetypes that I'll share in a different video, but they really embody the shadow and the light of these different stories that impact us. But for me, there was a lot of stories of my past that I didn't want people to know. I went on to join the Marine Corps. I was going to college. I was studying sports management, which I have no idea what that is even now. I just liked playing soccer and thought sports management sounded cool, so I'd go to school for that. But I got down there, and it was really just an opportunity to party, and so that's what I did. And and it just became apparent very quickly that this was not going to be a trajectory for my life, and I needed to do something different. So I had a friend who joined the Marine Corps. I'd always wanted to join the Marine Corps or the military anyway, and so I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to join the Marine Corps too. And so I stood on those iconic yellow footprints. I became a Marine in the summer of 2005. Now, when I took my ASVAB test, I scored really high on it. I think I got like a 93 or something like that out of the possible 99. And my recruiter said to me, he goes, "You're in college, right?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "And you want to go infantry?" Yeah. I was like, "Yeah." My goal was to go to Scout Sniper School. That was the path that I wanted to go on. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "You know what?" He goes, "I don't think you should do that. I think you should join the reserves. There's a unit in New Jersey." I lived in New Jersey, obviously. There's a unit in New Jersey. "I think you should join the reserves and go back to college. And then if you do that and you decide you still just want to go active duty, then you could just, transfer over." Now, to this day, I don't know, and I can't say whether or not he did that because he was trying to hit a quota or because he genuinely cared. I don't know. I would like to think that he genuinely cared, but I believe the best about most people. Um, but anyway, I would say that he really did care and he wanted the best for me, and so that was his recommendation. And it was a good piece of advice. And whatever it was, God obviously had his own plans for me, and so that's what I did. I ended up joining the reserves instead. Signed on the dotted line to join a motor transport unit out of Red Bank, New Jersey, and so I became a Vogue. Now, again, I said earlier about how I was embarrassed of my story. And this is just one more thing, right? Because I cared what other people thought. I went people pleasing, stories of the past, and all this other stuff that I've been talking about. I was embarrassed about the fact that I didn't go infantry. Fast forward, I get deployed. We go overseas in 2009. I had gotten married, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit for a reason here because I go overseas. I was a lead machine gunner. I ended up training to be a machine gunner as well. And so I sat behind a gun, a 50 cal, the entire time I was in Iraq. I didn't drive a single time, even though I was motor transport. And we did security for convoys and things like that, which was pretty cool. I had never fired my weapon once the entire time that we were overseas, which was 2009 into early 2010. And so I was embarrassed about that. Right. So I didn't go infantry. I got deployed. I never fired my weapon. I was shot at, but I didn't get blown up or anything like that. And so I was embarrassed about the fact that I had gone to war, but didn't actually fully experience war. Right. And so it was just one more thing. And because I cared so much about what other people thought, I didn't share my story. I wouldn't talk about it. Most people didn't even know I was in the Marine Corps because I was a reservist. And so I only did it on weekends and 2 weeks out of the summer and whatever it was. And I just didn't talk about it. And so unless you knew me and knew that I had gone to boot camp or knew me well enough that I had to leave on drill weekends and saw me in my uniform, most people had no idea that I was in the military or the Marine Corps or otherwise. And that was true for most of my life. I didn't brag about it. I still don't brag about it. But before it was because I was embarrassed. Now I just don't brag about it. But anyway, stories of our past impact us. And so when I look back on the promise that I made on that couch, or the fact that I was put into a very chaotic life with my stepdad and all the different things that I had to go through with that, I remember looking back on those stories as the victim and thinking to myself, even as a young adult, I'm not going to miss out on my childhood. I'm going to do what I want. right? And so I let those stories of what I had been through dictate how I was going to live my present. But it was from the perspective of being controlled by those stories. I was reacting against those stories. The embarrassment that I had about my own story, the fact that I was ashamed about the fact that I joined the Marine Corps, but I didn't go infantry or to scout sniper school like I had planned and even told people. I had a buddy in college who actually ended up going to scout sniper school thinking he was going to see me there because we had lost touch. And we ended up reconnecting later on down the road, and he had gone to scout sniper school, which again made me feel a lot of shame because I didn't go through it. Those stories are these internal stories, right? I was telling myself that I wasn't good enough because I was telling myself that, my shame and guilt of not going that route, of being a reservist and not active duty, and all these different things were playing into what I believed about myself, let alone the stories that you hear outside too, right? People talking about that, oh, you're just a pogue person other than grunt, or you're this thing or you're that thing, you're just a reservist, right? You're just a weekend warrior. All of those things, because I didn't really have a good sense of myself and my own story and where I was going and what I was doing, really impacted me. I cared so much about other people and I cared so much about what they thought that I was a chameleon in all these different situations. And that was a main driving force that kept me from being who I was and who I really could be for a really long time. When I met my wife, as I mentioned earlier, grew up in Philadelphia, born and raised in Philadelphia. We had met, and I told you earlier that I had grown up kind of around the Christian community and around the church and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't really until I met her that I had become a Christian. And here was her stipulation. She said, well, if you want to date me, that's fine, but you have to go to church with me on Sundays. And by that point, I'd kind of renounced the whole faith thing and wasn't for me and didn't want anything to do with it. But in order to date her, 1 hour a week, not a bad trade-off, right? So I'm there. I'm down for it. And so we started dating. We got engaged not too long after that, less than a year or so, I believe, and then got married not too long after that. In 2009, this was in February. We did kind of like a quick, tight sort of, wasn't a shotgun wedding, but it was just, our immediate family. And that was really it. And a couple of our best friends. And so we got married, we tied the knot. And a few months after that, I got deployed to Iraq. And I kind of described that deployment to you already as a machine gunner. Met had known one of my best friends out there, became really close, still my best friend to this day. That's Brian Konopka there. It's me in the turret of that truck. And so, yeah, we did the deployment, the Al Anbar province. We were out there for a while. When I came back, Ali and I had a big ceremony for all of our friends and family, used some of that deployment money to pay for it there. And so we got to really celebrate our union and have everybody else join in with us. And really, honestly, that was the beginning of what has turned out to be a really difficult marriage. And the reason for that, in part, is because of my lack of dealing with my story up until that point. And in order to be in a deep and committed relationship, you've got to know who you are, where you're going, what you're doing. You have to face your own traumas and the abuses of your past and all the different things that you had gone through, and work to reintegrate those back into your life so that you can have a good idea of who you are and what your values are and what you want to accomplish, ultimately moving forward in that positive direction, right? But I was so reactive, so responsive, so people pleasing, such a chameleon, such a driven by all of these other different things, my own shame and guilt and inner critic and all that kind of stuff for the last 20 something years. I was bound by it. And so we couldn't be in a relationship that was successful. Now we enjoy an amazing family. And that is a testament to her and her strength and her sticking by me through all of this as I continue to unpack my story and understand more and more about it. But I am so thankful for her ability to call me out on all of these things so that I can have a deeper understanding of what my story is. And this is why I have become so passionate about helping other people understand and share their stories as well, because I know what it's like. like I've lived that life. Now, maybe on the extreme side of being controlled by all these different stories of the past, stories that other people put on us, my own inner stories and dialogues and negative self-talk and limiting beliefs and all that kind of stuff, because it controlled me for so much of my life and nearly tore it apart. I've nearly lost my marriage. I failed a drug test in the Marine Corps at one point and was almost kicked out of there because I was just not aligned with my principles and who I was, and was just reacting to whatever situation and circumstance came, and was really just focused on having a good time, not being responsible and doing the things that I should. And these failures in my life along the way that used to be moments of shame have turned into moments of deeper understanding, of wisdom, I hope, and being able to build on and learn from and grow from those things. Now, how does this apply to you? How does this apply to entrepreneurs? Why am I sharing this with you? Well, I've always wanted to help people. I've had a heart for other people, whether that was for my own self-interest in some situations or not. I really am passionate about helping other people live their best lives too. So much so that when I was in Iraq and had become a Christian, there were guys who were coming to me and asking me questions about things, and not faith, right? I'm not necessarily here to push that on anybody, but asking me or talking to me about things that they were dealing with at home or things that were going on. And I enjoyed that, right? I liked being able to help other people or provide some insight or even just listen. But I also realized very quickly that I don't know very much about what it means to be a Christian or how to help other people or even what to say or what to do, because I hadn't gone through that journey myself. And so without understanding that yet, I thought, well, how do I help more people? And since I really enjoy my faith and that's what I want to do, why don't I become a pastor? So I moved down to Florida after I came back from deployment, picked up my wife, born and raised Philadelphia, and said, hey, let's go down to let's go down to Florida. And she was willing to follow. So we moved down there. And I ended up getting my master's in divinity. So I've got an MDiv, but realized at some point through that process that I wasn't going to be a pastor, partly because, things had started to unravel between Allie and I, and my stories and different things that I had come up with. This person and persona that I had created that I wanted people to accept was unraveling. And so she didn't want to be a pastor's wife. She also didn't want me to be a pastor, and I shouldn't have been, because I had a lot to deal with and a lot to heal from first. And that's where I ended up meeting Nick. And Nick's the CEO and the founder of Celebrity Branding Agency, which turned me on to working with entrepreneurs and storytelling in a different kind of way. And so my journey since then has been understanding entrepreneurs and learning about entrepreneurs and what they've been going through. And as I dug in a little bit deeper, I realized that I've got in my own history and my own story, that I've got pretty deep roots of entrepreneurs as well. So this is my great grandfather. He came over from Italy on my dad's side. My mom's side, my grandfather's family came over from Italy as well. My grandmother's family came over from Germany. It looks like had been here from the 1700s. But anyway, I digress. So my great grandfather here started a Viscomi's Quality Meats and Grocery Store. As you can see in the picture, they also started a gelato and ice cream shop. And then my grandfather went on. He didn't start his own business or anything. I found out later that he was probably a bookie or running numbers or doing some sort of thing like that. So I think he did have his own business. He taught me how to count at a young age too, by pulling out a lockbox full of cash. And so I was counting money for him. So it starts to all jive together as all these stories come together of what was probably going on there. But either way, I just realized I have a passion for entrepreneurs because in some way, shape, or form, it really is a part of my blood. I remember even as a kid being really entrepreneurial and, starting my own landscaping company when I was 11 or so. I used to sell candy at school and even, in like fifth grade and things like that. So it's always just been a part of who I was and being passionate for helping people. And so both of those things combined, and now understanding how story has such an impact in my own life, that when I started to embrace my story and not be embarrassed by it, when I started to share the things that I had been through, that other people were willing to share the things that they had been through, and it was healing for all of us. By by talking about the fact that I was embarrassed of my story or felt like my story wasn't good enough for people to accept, and having to come up with other stories that I thought they would, or whatever it might be, in having a deeper understanding of those things, and then being able to be honest about those things. I've been able to get away from this people pleasing sort of mentality. I've been able to listen to my inner critic with less of a victim mindset. I've been able to understand my failures and past circumstances and past stories and all those different things as building blocks and stepping stones, to helping giving me a deeper level of wisdom that people who haven't gone through that might not have. And so it's reintegrated into a part of my life. And again, it's a journey that I'm still on. I'm still understanding and I'm still growing from, but it's one that I want other people to understand as well, is that at the core, in your ability to be able to understand your story, the stories of your past and all of these different things that I've talked about, that really the power and strength that you have is in your story. Your story is your strength, and sharing it breaks the silence that holds you captive to it, setting you free from the tyranny of your own thoughts, right? Kind of circling back to this idea of independence and July 4th and all these different things that, when you can embrace your story and understand it for what it is, and bring healing to that you can break free from that victim mindset, right? That has controlled me. But it also allows you to live more authentically. It gives you the freedom to be more of who you are, and then bring that to the world. And why that's so important for entrepreneurs is because at the end of the day, me as the consumer, the prospect or client, or anybody that you're working with, we all want to work with somebody that we can trust. But like my wife's inability to be able to trust me because she had no idea who I actually was, because I created this persona that I wanted people to accept, even her, then a relationship wouldn't work. And your business is all about building and maintaining relationships. And the foundation of that is trust. And if you can't build trust, then you can't have a deep and meaningful relationship with those people or anybody. And so my path of rebuilding trust in my relationships, my path of rebuilding trust in myself, my path of understanding and trusting other people, has all come from integrating this story. And I believe yours can too. And then how you use that in your business is by understanding your story and the reason why you do what you do, right? So I just shared with you the reason why I do what I do, why I'm so passionate about story and helping entrepreneurs. But why are you so passionate about business coaching, being a financial advisor, getting into real estate? It may not be that you are always wanting to be a real estate agent, but maybe it had more to do with finding a home. Maybe it had more to do with getting out on your own. Maybe it was that had saw how your parents worked a 9 to 5 and the company didn't care about them, and so you wanted to do your own thing. Who knows what your story is? We can work together, and I work with clients all the time and helping them to develop their story in some of our advanced workshops and stuff. But whatever it is, whatever your story is, your core story, the reason why you do what you do, in your ability to be able to connect with that, and to connect with that deeply, is also your ability to then be able to talk to your ideal client and build a deep level of trust with them before they even get on the phone with you. And then once they do, they get to know the real you, right? Because you've worked through that process and you've been able to do it. It's how you do authentic marketing, in my opinion. That's really what I believe, is by understanding your story, being true to yourself and who you are and your values and the core values of your business and your life and everything else. Then you can speak from that place in a way that impacts other people and shows them that you are the right person to do business with, right? And your expertise comes into play after that as well, right? So anyway, I share all that with you here. My passion for story, my passion for helping entrepreneurs is really born from my own story and the things that I've been through and gone through and seen and healed from, and things that I'm still healing from. But I want that for you as well. And at the end of the day, I believe that is what life is all about. We take the things that we've gone through, the experiences that we have, the expertise that we've gleaned, the wisdom that we've gained over the years. We take all of those things, we wrap it up, and we give it back as a gift to the people in our lives and those around us, so that we can all build and grow together. taking our lives, our businesses, our kids' lives, our friends, families, whatever we can to the next level as we work together, sharing our stories, embracing our stories, and understanding our stories. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, whatever it is that you do. And until next time, keep elevating and accelerating. Cheers.